What is time scarcity? At the end of the day, time scarcity is nothing more than a fear of losing time. It's a fear of running out of time. It's a fear of not having enough time. It's a fear of things not happening fast enough. Or on the flip side, you're afraid that things are happening too slowly. And it's also an attachment to outcomes. When we have time scarcity, we are attached to outcomes. We're attached to how things will go down, how things will turn out, what will happen, when will it happen, what will it actually turn out to be. And we're so afraid, we're so worried, we're so concerned, we're so stressed out about how something will turn out. And that is actually a product of time scarcity, because let me dig into this a little bit deeper. The reason why you might have an attachment to an outcome is because you want something to happen by a certain time. Because if it doesn't happen this time, then we automatically go into, then I'm going to have to start all over. If I don't get married by the time I'm 30, then I'm going to have to start all over. What if I don't have kids by the time I'm whatever? Then my clock is going to tick. So you have these attachments of outcomes because you also have time scarcity as well. And that's how these things play together. So let's talk about how it shows up for us. Let's talk about symptoms of time scarcity. How do you know that you have time scarcity? You expect things to happen in a certain amount of time. Why isn't this happening right now? Or you might also expect things to happen faster or slower. You have this idea of expectation of when something is supposed to happen and how long it will take. You get anxiety over how long things will take. A lot of times, time scarcity can show up as anxiety over how long something will take before you even start it. So you're like, well, I don't know if I want to start this project. What if it takes too long? What if it takes too long for me to start? What if it takes too long for me to figure it out? What if it takes too long for me to learn it? What if I end up working on this for 3 months and then it's still not good enough? What if I put all this time into it and then it ends up not even being the thing that I want? And that is literally the opposite of you being present, because now you're afraid of how long something will take, how much time it will take. You're measuring and calculating versus just being in the now and letting whatever outcome, letting whatever happen, happen. So on the flip side, if you were not anxious about how long things would take, if there was no concept of that at all, wouldn't you just do it because you felt like it, because you were present? Wouldn't you just be like, I think I want to build a shelf for my bedroom because I need a shelf. And then you just begin. But then the minute you start to calculate and all these things, you're not in that present moment anymore. Because if you were just present, let's say, okay, you go in order, you do the thing, you start working on it, and then you go, oh, wow, this is taking longer than I thought. Okay, well, instead of getting stressed out about it, now, if you're present, you could be like, this is taking longer than I thought. What do I need right now? I think I need a break. I think I want to keep going. I think I'm just going to accept that today I learned building a shelf by myself takes a lot longer. Today, I learned that I'm not a handyman or a handy woman. Today, I learned, right? You take it as data, but instead, now you get stressed out about how long things are taking, how it's taking away time from you, how it's et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, time scarcity also shows up as anxiety over what will happen in the future. I think we overthink these things all the time. It's like, well, I don't know if I want to start this thing, or like what if I make this decision? Like, I'm afraid to make this decision because of what might happen in the future. Now, of course, it's important to be discerning. It's important to be mindful, and it's important to not just impulsively react to things. But on the flip side, I'm talking about the kind of anxiety that keeps you from actually being present. I'm talking about the anxiety that makes you overthink. I'm talking about the anxiety that stops you and slows you down from actually just doing the thing, because you get in your head and you're not present. So what's funny is that you're actually delaying the future by being afraid of what might happen in the future as well. Feeling pressured to have X by X timeline. And this is, I think, the biggest way that time scarcity shows up for most people, right? I need to be blank by 30. I need to have blank by 40. I need to have this accomplished. I want to make sure that I have this amount of money by the time I'm 50. I need to make sure that I want to have so many assets. I want to have my first house by the time I'm 40. I want to have my first business by the time I'm this. It's like, why? Why? So look at how much suffering that actually creates for you. Not having fun now because you have to get to the goal first. We put off joy. We think joy is something that we have to earn. We think joy is something that can come after you've put in the work, after you've made the money, after you did the thing. But joy is actually the most natural and organic state you should be in. As a matter of fact, if you're not in your joy, you should probably stop what you're doing. So a big way that time scarcity shows up for a lot of us is that we don't have fun now because you have to get to the goal first. And then obviously not spending the time or money now so that you can have it later. If we could use this as a inspiration for you, just to kind of get the wheels greased, what do you feel like is something that comes up for you around time scarcity? Like, is it more about running out of time? Is it more about needing to have something by a certain age? Is it more about wanting something to happen faster or slower? How does time scarcity show up for you? So I just wanted to just remind us of why we have time scarcity in the first place. First of all, we just believe it's real in the first place, right? And obviously programming, right? Programming, if we're just going through the pillars, programming, what you were taught, what people told you, what you were told your whole life, right? What society tells us. Oh, you should start doing this by 20. You should start doing this by 30. You should have this figured out by the time you're 40, right? And so there's all these like numbers and timelines and measurements that we're always feeling pressured by. All right, control issues, because we want to control everything. People, timelines, when things happen. Lack of self-love and self-trust. Now, this is a huge one for me personally. I feel like, programming, at this point, I feel like I've done a lot of work around that. That's been many ways, a lot of the programming that I was raised under, like that's kind of been blown out of the water by now. But I think for me, what really comes up is a lack of self-love and self-trust. The minute I start to feel time scarcity, the minute I start to feel like, oh no, like we haven't hit our numbers for this year, what are we going to do? Like if I start worrying about numbers and business and things like that, what always brings me back to abundance mindset is self-love and self-trust. Because for me, going back to knowing that I'm going to be okay, knowing that I trust myself, knowing that I can rely on myself, knowing that I have the creativity, the resources, the ideas, the energy, the will, the destiny to be fine is what brings me back into abundance. So I know a lot of us obviously struggle with programming control issues and whatnot, but I also want you to really think about how much self-love and self-trust is also a part of how you combat time scarcity. You also have time scarcity because you're living to meet expectations. You're living to meet expectations of your boss, your manager, your company. It's other people's expectations. You're in the shadow of other people's timelines, your parents, your culture, your society. Right? Like, oh, well, in Korean culture, they say if you're not married by 30, you're just useless old broad, right? You literally grow up hearing that your whole life and you feel that pressure, right? They're not even your expectations, it's everybody else's expectations, okay? Obviously feeling pressure from family, society, peers. And then obviously, last but not least, most importantly, lacking intention, meaning, and purpose. You feel time scarcity because you're actually lacking intention. You feel time scarcity because you don't actually even know where you literally don't know where you're going. You literally don't know where you're going. You literally have no intention and meaning. So of course you feel time scarcity because the clock is ticking and you don't know where you're going. But the minute you realize, oh, I never plan on getting married, all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, my life just opened up by 100 more years. The more intention you have, the more meaning you have, you will not feel a lack or scarcity in time. I promise you, because attachment comes from scarcity. Attachment to timelines comes from scarcity. If you have intention and you trust yourself in that intention, like for me, my primary intention is to just live this beautiful, rich, sacred life that I know is going to be non-negotiable. And I trust myself and I know that I'm going to put myself in that position and set myself up for that forever and ever. I have no more timelines now. It's all going to happen. It's already happening and it will continue to happen. So I feel no sense of pressure of, oh, by the time I'm this, I need to have that. And by the time it's like, cool. Like, so I hear that the highlight of my life is going to be here in about 10 years or so. So I obviously just want to keep doing my best until then. So I don't like screw myself out of that inheritance, right? Like that's about it. And it'll happen not only when it's supposed to happen, but how it's supposed to happen is something that I always really try to think about as well. I think that's one of the things that I usually go back to. It's not even about the when, it's actually about the how, especially when I have things like, my last 7 weeks in Korea with my tooth falling out and pink eye and all that stuff. I'm like, well, this isn't how I expected this trip to go, but this is how it's going down. And I'm just going to surrender to the process because I know it's all happening for a reason. What's really healing for me whenever we do group talk like this is A lot of times when you have scarcity on a timeline, oh my God, I need to have this by 30 or I need to have this by 40. You feel like it's like a solo pressure, like, oh my God, everyone's watching me. Like I'm the only one that doesn't have this. Then you step into a room and you realize, this is how I think about it. Oh my God, 20 other people also feel this exact same pressure. One, I'm not alone. Two, we're clearly all in on, we're clearly all bought into some racket if we all think like this. And three, maybe we should stop giving into this racket. Because how is it possible that 20 different people in this room that are at different age groups, that came from different backgrounds, that grew up in different cities and different households, all have the same fear? Like, that's crazy. What the fuck have we been brainwashed by? And I feel like that kind of helps us have more perspective on how much we've actually been brainwashed. Because when you don't realize that everybody else thinks that way, you think it's a you problem. But when you start to realize that everybody else in the room feels that way, all of a sudden you go, oh, it's not me, it's them. This is a society problem. This is a cultural problem. This is nothing. I need my own free will. I'm not going to let this be put on me. And then that's when you start to set yourself free. Let's actually go to a solution. The more present you are and you train yourself to be present, that will continue to dissolve and disintegrate your fears around some kind of concept of being stuck in a forever, because you can just be in this moment. And part of you being afraid of being stuck in some kind of time capsule or being stuck in a loop or being stuck in some kind of like never ending saga of anything is also like you believing like that, like honestly, like my brain wants to go to that you believe that time is real. But it is really because you think time is so real that you think somehow it can gobble you up, that somehow it's gonna kidnap you and hostage you. I want you to think of it like that. It's all about how you perceive the situation, right? So you can believe, and now we can simplify. Now let's simplify to you always have a choice. Now let's really simplify, bring it back down to earth and go into you always have a choice. So you can choose to believe and perceive that you are trapped or that you will be trapped, or you can choose to believe that you are always moving towards freedom, letting go of these constructs and like feeling less and less controlled by them and feeling less and less hostage by them, right? Feeling less controlled and hostage by the concept of money, by the concept of time, by the concept of age and numbers and this and that, right? Like that's what true freedom is for me. It's like, oh, I'm just going to exist until I don't exist anymore. And how can I do that in the most beautiful, joyful, rich, sacred way possible? The minute that we start to perceive these things as controlling or getting in the way of us, they do.